Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Kirsten and I am a travel and life coach for Black women. And today I'm going to tell you a story of how living in Panama, living in the jungle pretty much, helped me to overcome fear. And stay tuned to the end and I will give you 3 tips on how to overcome your fears, especially if you're thinking about moving abroad or traveling solo. So I lived in Panama for about 2 years, and in my second year I lived in this beautiful, very small town with like 400 people called Playa Banao, and it was right on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, so I'd walk out every day and be able to go to the beach. It had its challenges, it had its wonderful moments. I would often say that I was living in paradise, and it was great, but I learned a lot and probably experienced one of the biggest moments or biggest times of personal development while living in a place where there weren't even major grocery stores nearby. I talk a lot about my experience living here in a book that I wrote called So You're Inspired, Now What? And you can check it out with the link in the description. And it pretty much tells some stories of spiders and snakes, and pretty much learning how to live in a completely new environment that I had never lived before. So you can check that out. And now I'm going to tell you the story of one of my favorite adventures, living in Playa Banao, Panama. So my friend had told me about this beautiful river, as you can see here, that was, excluded, that was beautiful, that had nice cool water to swim in. The only thing is that she didn't know exactly where it was. So we started this adventure just kind of driving in the general direction, passing through town, and really getting out of our car and asking people if they knew where this river was. It was super exciting. When we finally found the river, it was like stepping into a different world. As you can see here in these pictures, we walked across these like craters, these really Jurassic rock formations that I was kind of terrified to fall into because I might fall into the depths of hell, but I had never seen anything quite like it before. It was one of those moments in time where you kind of felt like you completely escaped from the outside world, that time had stood still. It was a very, very magical experience, and after we arrived and got settled, we decided to take an adventurous leap into the river. I stood at the edge of the white rocks, staring into the dark green water where little specks of light sparkled under the sunlight. Below the surface, it was dark, revealing the river was deeper than we could imagine. My friend and I were prepared to jump in after we saw someone else do it first, of course. Although my body was still, my insides were shaking. We counted to 3. 1, 2, and on 3 I bent my knees and I leaped into the air. People often say that I'm so brave to have moved to a different country, but being fearless had very little to do with it. I was terrified before moving abroad. I remember 2 weeks before I left, I broke down in tears because I realized that everything I knew, everything I was used to, would be different. Fear is a funny thing. I think fear exists to keep us safe. But fear is also that jealous friend that will tell you something bad is going to happen because it doesn't want you to have too much fun. They think that going outside of your comfort zone is something scary. but oftentimes it's something great. When I jumped into the river, even though it wasn't that high of a jump, I remember how my body felt sinking into the water. I didn't know how far down the bottom was. I could feel my body sinking, and for a moment I panicked. But I knew that I would float, and naturally I would rise to the top. When I rose to the surface, feeling the water fall from my face, I opened my eyes with a deep breath of air, and to my surprise, my friend, who was supposed to jump with me, was standing above me, laughing. The oldest trick in the book, right? Even though I was mad that I fell for that trick, I was happy that I did what I said I would do. I jumped on 3. I stood up to fear, and fear backed down. When was the last time you jumped into something you were afraid of? Hey everyone, so I hope that you enjoyed my story of my Panama adventure, and as promised, here are 3 ways that you can overcome your fears, especially if you plan on one day or in the near future moving abroad or even traveling solo. So number 1 is if you have some certain goal, whether it is to move abroad or solo travel or I don't know, leave your job or whatever, pay attention to the language that you are using. A lot of the times we'll say like, oh, I would love to live abroad, but I'm too afraid to. I would love to do X, but I'm too afraid. Stop saying you're so afraid, or stop giving the fear the energy and the attention. And because when you keep saying those things, you're convincing your brain that you're not able to do something that you want, and you're allowing the fear to take over. So start changing that language. You can say that I'm so nervous. You can say that I'm working up the courage to move abroad or do XYZ. I am preparing myself to do this, but don't give in to this notion of like, I'm too afraid, I'm not brave enough, etc., etc. Ixnay those words or phrases from your vocabulary. Number 2 is you want to think about what you're really afraid of. And so when you think about that, like, go there. And I think I've said this in other videos when it comes to moving abroad, and how you should sit with your fear and go to the worst case scenario and really think about what can I do, because a lot of the times worst case scenario is not going to happen. Usually you'll end up somewhere in the middle. From like the best to the worst case scenario, you usually end up somewhere in the middle. But when you go to the worst case scenario and you can feel those feelings, 1, 2, you'll probably start to realize that you're really just afraid of that feeling and not necessarily totally the situation, because 98% of the time you're going to figure it out. If you think back into your life of all the stuff that happened unexpectedly that you figured out, you took care of it, you're still alive today. If you're watching this video, I'm pretty sure that things in your life are going decent enough and that you survived whatever you've been through and that you are going through. So just go to the worst case scenario, sit with those feelings, and ask yourself, okay, but what next? What would I do if this happened? And number 3 is to really think about the person that is overcoming those fears and try to be that person every day. So if that person that you want to be is that person that moves abroad and is, living their life, well, what does that person do every day? What kind of scenarios does that person find themselves in? What kind of language or self-talk does that person use with themselves? Really think about those things and try to be that person a little bit every day until you start to overcome this fear. I want to reiterate this notion of fearlessness, and that you don't have to be fearless. I think that fear is,
can be crippling, but also fear is important because it tells us it's something dangerous or it tells us that we're onto something good. So don't feel like you need to be fearless to do anything or to go after your dreams. As I had mentioned in my video, I wasn't fearless before moving abroad, but I still did it. I still understood how to feel the fear and do it anyway. And if you're in that position too, where you just feel crippled by fear and you feel like fear is holding you back from either moving abroad or living the life that you love, then you can click the link below and we can do a consultation around getting over your fears. And I can give you concrete exercises that's going to trick your brain and create a goal that you can work towards every day to overcoming your fear and living the life that you deserve.